morning, everyone, and welcome to our first health summit. The Bible says that, beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in good health. And so, as Christians, in our quest for balance, we want to gain knowledge, and so that's why we're here today. And so, I want to just welcome you. Our experience in our Christian life, many Christians are hesitant about their journey concerning their health, and we just want to bring clarity and answer any questions that you have on today. And so I'm really excited about our first um, health summit on today. All right, so I want to just start off in prayer, and then we're going to introduce our facilitator for our panel on today. So, Father, we thank you. We give you all the glory and praise. This is a day that you have made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We thank you, Lord, for just this idea. And we thank you, Lord. You said, trust in you in all our heart, with all our heart, and lean not to our own understanding. And so, God, we seek understanding on today. We thank you for our panelists, oh God, and we thank you for the gifts and talents that you have given them, and that they're willing to share with your people. And so we bless you on this day, and we pray, oh God, that you would just bless this summit, oh God, bring understanding to everyone. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, this morning we will introduce Miss Walena Smith, who's going to be our facilitator for today.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first annual health summit here at Christ Revival. We have a great panelist here today, and I want to remind you guys to, if you have questions that's watching live, to make sure that you submit them on the chat. We will address the questions at the end of the summit. We'll have the panelists to answer those questions. We're going to go over that. I do have a disclaimer that we want to read, is that we need to tell you guys that the information we provided here today is for educational purpose only and does not substitute professional medical advice or consultations with your healthcare providers. Although our panel are experts in their field, in their knowledge, it's studied and extensive research. We here at CRC ask that you consult your physicians before implementing any practices discussed here today. So we're going to start first with introducing our first panelist, which is Crystal Smith. Crystal Smith attended St. Xavier University for a bachelor's and master's degree and is a registered nurse for 19 years. She has been a board-certified family nurse practitioner for the past 5 years. She's recently completed coursework and has obtained certification as a functional medicine practitioner. Crystal has worked in a variety of settings throughout her professional career and currently sees patients in their homes as a nurse practitioner and integrates functional medicine with each patient encounter. Diabetes is one of her favorite health topics for educating others. So Crystal has dedicated her business, Crystal Smith Functional Medicine, solely to helping individuals with type 2 diabetes achieve healthier lifestyles. Please welcome Crystal Smith.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, I will be talking about diabetes in your health during this short and brief presentation that I have prepared for you. Okay, so before we get started, I just have some statistics just to run by. According to the World Health Organization, last year, 2020, approximately 34.2 million Americans have diabetes. So be it diagnosed, be it undiagnosed, 34.2 million Americans have diabetes. Of that 34.2 million, approximately 26, 27 million are diagnosed, and approximately 6 or 7 million are undiagnosed at this point. And to give you a more worldwide view, for those who are interested, 422 million people worldwide have diabetes, be it diagnosed or undiagnosed. So that just kind of shows you how diabetes is an epidemic, and those numbers are only increasing. So we can go ahead and show the next slide. So what exactly is diabetes? Diabetes is a chronic, serious condition that causes higher than normal blood sugar or glucose levels. And diabetes occurs when your body cannot make or effectively use its own insulin, which is the hormone that is made in the pancreas. So that red highlighted portion is where your pancreas sits in your body, just to kind of give you an idea of the pancreas and where it is in your body. There are multiple forms of diabetes, but type 1 and type 2 are the most common forms, but there are other forms as well. But we'll just focus on type 1 and type 2 for today. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So type 1 is our most severe form of diabetes, and the pancreas no longer produces insulin for type 1 diabetics. And why that's the most severe form is because the immune system, the body's immune system, is attacking the insulin-producing cells that are located in the pancreas. So the sugar just stays in the blood and it builds up. And type 1 of those people who are diagnosed with diabetes affects about 5% of people. Type 2 diabetes is your most common form, so most people have type 2 diabetes, and that's where your pancreas is producing some insulin, but it's not enough. Or your body does not use the insulin that it produces properly. And type 2 affects about 90% of the population who have diabetes. Next slide. So this slide here just shows the signs and symptoms of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So there's no differentiation between type 1 and type 2 signs and symptoms for diabetes. To differentiate type 1 from type 2 is how sudden the symptoms would come on and progress. So typically with type 1 diabetes, the symptoms would be over a couple weeks time frame. With type 2 diabetes, it's typically a longer term that the symptoms will progress, and a lot of times we would ignore those symptoms and then just kind of treat the symptoms as being normal for us, when in fact it's a signal that something definitely is going on with your body. So just want to explain with the signs and symptoms that are up there and listed, those are not always indicative that you will be diagnosed with diabetes, because a lot of disease processes will present with some of the same similar signs and symptoms. So just to go over just 3 of them, the typical hallmark signs and symptoms of diabetes would be the first 3. So that's your increased thirst, increased urination, and extreme hunger. So those are typically considered your hallmark signs and symptoms of diabetes, and anything that you should experience, you should go ahead and get checked out by your primary care provider. Next slide. And this slide here just kind of shows you the risk factors for things to watch out for to determine if you are at an increased risk for being diagnosed with diabetes. So it's not to say that if you have met all of these risk factors that you will be diagnosed with diabetes. It is also not to say that if you do not have any of those risk factors that you will not be diagnosed with diabetes. But this just gives you an idea of what to look out for. And if you are able to check off pretty much all of those things or all of the factors that are listed there, then you need to go ahead and make an appointment with your primary care provider as soon as possible. So just want to go over a few of the risk factors that you can change, such as being overweight, physically inactive, if you have high blood pressure and you're taking medications for that, and if your cholesterol numbers are off as well. Those are things that you can change and to lower your risk factors if you do not have diabetes already. If you already have diabetes, then it's not the end of the world. It can be managed and reversed. Next slide. So this slide here just kind of speaks to prevention methods for perhaps maybe the person who's at risk for diabetes and have not been diagnosed just yet, or the person who has been diagnosed with, say, borderline diabetes or pre-diabetes even. If you want to do some prevention techniques to make sure that you're not being diagnosed with diabetes. So just to point out a few, you want to establish a healthy weight loss plan. So that's not, say, your typical, your trendy, say, your trendy diet plans that promises, say, 20, 30-pound weight loss in a couple weeks. That is more so you want to be on something that's going to give you a long-term benefit where you can keep the weight off and maintain your ideal body weight, okay? And that's based upon your height. You also want to increase your level of activity. So if you're a person who is physically inactive, if you consider activity to be, say, going from your couch to your refrigerator, then you need to change and do a little bit more as far as physical activity goes. So the guidelines, the recommendations actually for physical activity is for you to have at least 5 days a week, 30 minutes for those 5 days that you're doing exercise, and make sure that your heart rate is up, okay? So if you're a person who have not been exercising, you want to start slow and then progressively move up to that 30-minute mark. So it's not to say today, if you have not been exercising for some years, you cannot meet 30-minute goal today. That would be unrealistic for you to do today. So you might want to start out maybe with 5 minutes and then progress your way up to that 30-minute mark 5 times per week. And another point to make about exercise, if it's an activity that you like, you're more apt to stick with it and you're more apt to be successful with it. If you, say for instance, are not a runner, then don't think, that now is a good time to pick up running because you're not going to stick with it. So just a note about that. One more thing to point out here, you want to drink water as your main beverage. And reason being, just water is just an overall healthier option for your whole body. It will benefit every organ, blood vessels, and all of those things in your body. So some people tell me they cannot tolerate water, they don't like the taste of it, but you can spruce water up. If you have some lemon wedges or lime wedges or some lemon juice, just a little bit, you can squirt that in your water. If you're a fruit-infused water type of drinker, go ahead and just maybe take a handful of blackberries or blueberries and put those in your water. That's all you want to add to it. You do not want to put sugar in it at that point because then it becomes a fruit drink instead of water. So you want water as your main beverage, and the current recommendations are based upon your weight. That's how much water you should drink. So for example, if you are 180 pounds, you should drink 90 ounces of water per day, okay? So versus a person who weighs perhaps 200 pounds, that person needs to drink 100 ounces of water per day. So you're drinking half of your body weight in pounds, you're gonna drink that in ounces in water every day, okay? And just one more thing, if you're a smoker, you wanna quit smoking, that's a complete benefit overall for your entire health. Okay, next slide. For those who might be concerned, how is diabetes diagnosed? What will they do? What will they look for if I do go see the doctor? Your most common blood test is through a finger prick or a blood draw, and it's called your hemoglobin A1C test. That is the most common form, but there are other forms that are available that your doctor may or your provider may use. And what happens with that, while you're in the office, if it's a finger prick, you will get the results within like 5 minutes or so, and you can know right there exactly what your numbers are, where you stand, because it measures your blood sugar over the past 2 to 3 months. If your provider is also ordering other blood work to be done, such as they want to look at your cholesterol numbers or your kidney function, then they'll draw a tube of blood from your arm here. And, the results will come back in a couple days, maybe a week, depending on how the lab is ran and operated. Okay, go ahead. Next slide. So just some treatment options for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. For type 1, there is no medical cure for type 1 diabetes because, once again, the body is unable to produce insulin. So these people who are diagnosed with type 1, they are your people who have to have insulin injections or insulin pump. They have to get their insulin from an outside source. People with type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, it can be managed if you are exercising and proper diet techniques, things like that. So it was once thought that once you had diabetes, once you were diagnosed with it, you would die with it. That is no longer the case. It can be managed, and if you work hard with it, type 2 diabetes can actually be reversed. If your lifestyle changes just aren't enough, Then your doctor, your primary care provider, will add on other medications, be it oral, be it an injectable medicine such as your Victoza or Byetta. If those options still aren't sufficient, your provider will prescribe insulin for you. Okay, go ahead, next slide. And this slide here just talks about the effects of uncontrolled diabetes, what it has on your body. And not just uncontrolled diabetes, but also those people who are not diagnosed. So the people who are walking around with diabetes and actually have no knowledge of it, you're still at risk of increased stroke. You're still at risk of blindness because your blood vessels in your eyes are damaged, especially if you're seeing, say, the black spots, the dark spots that you possibly may be seeing with, in your vision. That's a signal that your blood vessels are damaged, and that can lead to blindness. Your risk for heart attack goes up. Your risk for kidney disease, where you would need dialysis, goes up as well as the potential for amputations. So your toes, your foot, your leg. So there are a lot of effects that diabetes has overall on your entire body. Next slide. And this slide here I just added because there are a lot of people who avoid medical care for several reasons. And just to kind of point that and bring that to light, that, you know, be it time constraint or be it you feel that you're pretty much healthy, you're able to run 3-5 miles a day, and you feel like, I don't need to see the doctor because nothing is wrong with me, you should still go ahead and make that primary care provider appointment, because just having that blood work on file, if you get blood work done, say once a year, that's better than nothing at all. Because even with the slight changes that could go on that can be picked up, say with the blood draw, you can identify and your provider can begin to work with you on the level where where they notice the changes at. So instead of waiting until perhaps you feel sick and you possibly fall out or anything like that, go ahead and see the doctor. In fact, while you are well, that way you can review options in order to stay well and stay on the track that you're currently on. But if your blood work is picking up anything or showing some slight variation, it's easier to catch it and address it when it's still early enough to be called in or addressed, rather than waiting until perhaps it's at its final stages. So just a word of caution, go ahead. Yes, today is Saturday. Maybe your primary care provider office is closed. It might still be open for you to make an appointment. But if you can, make the appointment today. If you cannot, go ahead on Monday and call your provider to get that appointment scheduled. Okay? So once again, I would just like to say thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And once again, just to reiterate, this information was just for educational purposes only. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Crystal. That was great. Very informative. Our next panelist that we're going to introduce is Adonis Ducray. Adonis Ducray is the Chief Operating Officer at Local Health Incorporation. He is responsible for all the pharmacy sales and operations, including end-to-end management of all pharmacy and clinical sales activities. Adonis earned his doctorate in pharmacy from University of Arkansas for medical science. He also holds a Master's of Business Administration from DePaul with a focus of strategy, execution, and valuation. He is the co-founder of one of the first telepharmacy chains in the state of Illinois, whose mission is to place pharmacies in underserved urban and rural communities. Adonis has conducted drug research at both Virginia Tech and University of Wisconsin, where he has publication in the Journal of Chemical Physics. Adonis is an active alumni at Grambling State University, where he earned his Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry. Let's welcome Adonis Ducray. Thank you.
Good morning. I guess what I'm gonna, good morning. What I'm gonna start off is a big misconception that people have is, or lack of understanding is what exactly pharmacists do. So I'll go briefly into that, and then we'll go into just some medication discussion, which are just things that you should discuss, talk about with your doctor, or just even think about before starting a prescription or over-the-counter medication. So the role of the pharmacist. Pharmacists typically go to undergraduate school for 4 years, and then you go on into a doctorate program for the next 4 years. That 4 years you spend learning about pharmacology. That's basically how drugs affect the body and what's the body's effect back on the drug. Typically, a medical doctor goes to medical school for 4 years. They spend probably 1 semester on pharmacology. So whereas a pharmacist spends 4 years just focused on that. So when you go to your pharmacy, or your pharmacist is really a drug expert. Most people are familiar with like the retail pharmacist, but there's pharmacists in all different avenues of the hospital and clinical environment. So, and just to put that in perspective. So what is a medication? The big misconception is, prescription medications are bad, over-the-counter medications are safe, vitamins and supplements, are also considered medications. So the 2 big categories are prescription and over-the-counter. When we think of over-the-counter, we think of everything that you can buy without a prescription, right? So prescription medications can only be prescribed by a doctor, and in some instances, a pharmacist as well. Prescription medications include things like vaccines. So when you get the flu shot, when you get the COVID vaccines, those are prescription medications. So just keep that in mind when you're getting vaccinated. So with every medication, there's 2 names. There's a brand name and a generic name. The brand name is like, the brand name is typically the drug company that created and paid, hundreds of millions of dollars to get that drug formulated. After about 10 years, that drug maker loses exclusivity and anyone can make that drug. So then that's when you start seeing generic drugs. Generic drugs means that they're the same thing as brand name drugs, it's just multiple people could have made that, or different manufacturers could have made that drug. Typically, generic drugs are a lot cheaper. So the best thing to do whenever you're looking at medications, try not to pay attention to the brand name. Always look at the generic name, because no matter what manufacturer or what brand you get, the generic name should never change. Tylenol is acetaminophen, so it doesn't matter what the front of the label says. Just always, once you get a bottle of medication, turn and just see what the active ingredient is. So if you think of common names, Advil, it's ibuprofen, but also you may see Motrin, which is also ibuprofen. So when you get these bottles, always look at the active ingredient on the back of the label. So these are just common examples: Prilosec, Tylenol, Advil. And keep in mind, Prilosec used to be a prescription-only medication. Now they've converted it to over-the-counter medication. So what that tells me is that there's risk with over-the-counter medications as well. So you have to be very mindful. Just because something is over-the-counter, keep in mind it used to be prescription-only. And there's a reason why it was prescription-only. So just keep that in mind, that when you're taking over-the-counter medications, turn to the back of the bottle. Always look at what the maximum dosage for a day is and never exceed that, because it can be harmful. So a big conversation that we get most phone calls about is the COVID vaccine. So I thought it'd be appropriate to kind of bring that in. So just for everyone's understanding, right now, as of late, yeah, so 3 immunizations were approved by the FDA. Earlier this week, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was put on pause. So it's still technically approved by the FDA. However, about 6 people had a brain blood clot out of about 6 million people that received the vaccine. Since that, blood clots are pretty common, but the type of blood clot that is occurring with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is very rare, to say the least. So that's why there's been a pause on that vaccine, just so they can figure out why that's occurring. So the three different types of vaccines are Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. Moderna and Pfizer are both 2 doses. You get the first dose, and then you wait 28 days or more, up to 6 weeks, to get the second dose. The reason why it's 2 doses is because the first dose is, it gives you a level of protection, but then the second dose is what is considered a booster. So that booster is where it really adds to the longevity of the vaccine in your body. So you really want to get the booster. Some people think, oh, I got the first one, I don't need the second one. No, the second one goes in concert with the first one. So the big difference between the Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson is how they're made. So Moderna and Pfizer are both made using something called mRNA. So what that means is messenger RNA. So in kind of layman's terms, what that means is with most vaccines, you're either injected with the inactive virus or the active virus or live virus. With this new vaccine, what they're doing is they're not doing either one of them. They're putting cells in your body that kind of serve as like police in a way. So those cells that they inject in your body knows what COVID looks like. So once your body is exposed to COVID, those cells that you're injected with tell the natural RNA cells in your body what to do when COVID comes along. So your body mounts its own immune response back to COVID. So those Moderna and Pfizer both work that way. Johnson & Johnson works very differently, where they put a virus, like a dead virus in your body, and that virus knows how to defend against COVID. So that's the big difference between the two. So that's why the Moderna and the Pfizer are both made the same way, and they work the same way in your body. That's why they're still on the market. That's why they haven't been recalled, even though some people have received blood clots with them as well. But those blood clots that occur with them, there's treatment for, they know why it occurs, and people aren't dying because of it. So that's a big thing. Another misconception is with the 95% efficacy, that doesn't mean that you have a 95% chance of not catching COVID. What that means is if you do catch COVID, your symptoms are 95% less than what they would be if you didn't have the vaccine. So just because you get the vaccine doesn't necessarily mean you can't catch COVID. However, if you do catch COVID, your symptoms and the effects that your body has would be dramatically lowered. And with the vaccine, if you haven't gotten it already or if you had it, some of the side effects is being tired, having a headache, muscle aches, and fever. Those are all very normal things. You have foreign cells being injected to your body, and your body is reacting to it. So those are common side effects. Those are different than like adverse effects, which would be blood clot or some other negative effect. And the other thing is we've seen Pfizer is the only one where children 16 or older can get. So if you're under 16 at this time, there's no vaccine on the market indicated for you or your children. Some quick tips on medication use. Always use the medications as directed. Don't think that double the dose is double the effect. Sometimes double the dose can have 8 times the effect on your body, so always use it as directed. And just when in doubt, just use the lower amount. Do not use expired medications. I really can't harp on this enough. Medications, everyone's seen pills and tablets before. They don't typically change color. So if you have a white tablet for 3 years and you compare it to a piece of bread that you have for 3 years, you can quickly see the effects of a piece of bread being molded and things like that. But when you look at that tablet, it looks the same. You have to keep in mind that tablet is going through the same decay process as a piece of bread, even though you can't see it. So never use expired medications. Typically, expired medications turn into other medications that could be more harmful. There's just variations of that chemical. So I always tell people, if you have something over a year, throw it away, don't use it. Unless it's an absolute life-threatening situation and it's an inhaler or something you need to stay alive, obviously take it. But vitamins and supplements, medications, just get rid of it. Never use medications that look abnormal. Try not to miss a dose. And always take your medications on time. And always wash your hands when you take a medication or after using the cream. Sometimes you don't realize what's on your hands and things like that. So always read, always get the medication leaflets at the pharmacy. Be very wary of buying prescription medications online. If you don't see any national certifications on the website, I just recommend don't do it. The big thing here is side effect. Just know the difference between a side effect and an adverse effect. A side effect, is something that you can tolerate. Adverse effect is something like a rash, or you have trouble breathing, or you go into shock or something like that. Those are instances where you never should take the medication again. Those are instances where you should call your healthcare provider immediately. And those are situations where you don't want to play with. So just be very mindful with any food, medication, vitamin supplement. If you ever get a rash, that's a good sign to not to take it. One of the big things that we have, and I'll say it's largely in the African American community, is when we go to the doctor's office, we tend to just take the prescriptions that are given, and we don't spend a lot of time just asking very basic questions. And I just challenge everyone that next time you go to the doctor's office, if you're prescribed a medication, ask one question that you typically wouldn't ask. It could be anything, but just ask the doctor, and sometimes you'll be surprised at the response that you get. A lot of times you just ask, what is the prescription for? It may be obvious, right? But sometimes it's not so obvious. Just ask what you're taking it for, because the next thing is, how will this medication help you, right? It's simple questions, but it goes a long way. A big one is, how much is this medication going to cost? The common thing that most doctors or nurses, may say, they don't know, and sometimes they don't know. But we've dealt with a lot of providers now that have formularies in their offices, or it may say they may have deep rebate programs or other things such as 340B and other programs in place that hospital or clinic may have that can help you pay for your medication. So never be afraid to ask about that. And then a big one is you can ask, especially with blood pressure medications, you can say, hey, is this medication work differently in African Americans than it does in other populations? That's a very valid question, and that's very necessary to ask, because sometimes there are studies and prescriptions out there that have shown to work better in African Americans than they do in other populations. And especially when you start thinking blood pressure medications and things like that, things for kidney protection. So, and be very comfortable asking those questions, because those answers are owed to you. How do you store medication? The big things here is, try not to leave your medication in direct sunlight. That also causes medications to change forms sometimes, so you don't want to do that. A lot of things with insulin, make sure it's in the refrigerator. Be careful putting it in the freezer. Sometimes thinking it'll get cool quicker or anything like that. Also, if you do have insulin, make sure you're checking the temperature of your fridge once in a while, just to make sure it's maintaining the proper temperature. Glove compartments in cars, probably not the best place either. It gets really hot and humid in there, and it also can change medications, vitamins, supplements. So, and the big thing is putting multiple medications in the same bottle. I see a lot of patients do that, and the challenge is, even though you may know what they look like, all it takes is 1 month for the pharmacy to change to a different manufacturer, right? So then you have two pills that look the exact same, two pills that look differently that are for the same thing, and you take them both, and you're in a bad situation. It's always best to keep your medications separate however you can. It's just not a good habit. This just goes into don't put things in the freezer. Be very mindful. And inappropriate conditions, just not really, just really make medications ineffective. When you get your prescriptions or medications or vitamins, always look on the auxiliary labels. A lot of times the directions may say take one tablet once a day, but it may not say, shake well, or put in the fridge, or store at room temperature. Always look at the labels on the side. So, and there's a lot of other ones. Take with food for the nose, may cause drowsiness. Anything that says may cause drowsiness, definitely that should alert you, hey, maybe I shouldn't drive right after taking this, or maybe I should take it in the evening when I'm home or when someone's around you. And if you're administering something like this to a senior, make sure they're sitting down, because seniors have a high risk of falling and breaking a hip. So pay very attention to things that say may cause drowsiness. Also things that say take with water. Sometimes it may seem obvious, but you may not. Sometimes taking, I'll give you an example. Sometimes taking iron pill with orange juice is far superior than taking it with water, because orange juice improves the effectiveness of iron. So if you don't look at the label on the side that says take with orange juice, that's one thing, and the vice versa can sometimes occur with taking medications with milk or water. So always look on the side for that auxiliary label. With diabetics, when you're traveling, in the summertime we see a lot of this. Make sure when you're traveling, get a little freeze pack, get a little lunch pack to keep your insulin cool. It's perfectly fine to carry these things when you're traveling, as long as you have your insulin with the prescription label on it. So you don't want to pack your insulin in luggage or put it in the trunk of a car. Always make sure it's cool. If you're going on a trip for more than like 2 or 3 hours on the road, definitely get a freeze pack. Safe disposal of medications. Some of the things we get a lot of questions of, how do I properly get rid of our medications or vitamins or supplements? One of the things you want to do is you can put it in coffee grounds, put it in a little bottle, and just throw it in the trash. You can take cat litter, put it in that, put it in a bottle, throw it in the trash. What you don't want to do is pour it down the sink. It goes into our water system, and that's just not the proper way. Some things like fentanyl patches, those are things you probably want to cut it, fold it, flush it down the toilet. That's the one that I would say. Anything that is for pain and have a high risk of, like, any patches that someone can touch and get exposed to the medication, in that instance I would say perhaps flush it. But everything else, put it in dirt, put it in a bottle, and just throw it in the trash is a good way to safely dispose of your medications. So in a lot of areas, in some police stations and fire stations, you'll see drop-off boxes for your old pills and all vitamins just hanging around the house if you have bags and bags of it. A lot of fire stations will take it, so just keep that in mind. Just ask them, or they'll properly dispose of it. It's very important. A lot of diabetics, make sure you have sharps containers. Ask the pharmacy, ask around. You definitely want to keep sharps containers around the house. You don't want to get in the habit of just putting insulin in. Use syringes in the trash can. You have kids running around the house, or you may have to dig something out the trash. You may finger prick yourself, so definitely get sharps containers. One of the things we talked about earlier with the over-the-counter medications, make sure the first thing you do with the packaging, you should be flipping it to the back, look at the active ingredient. If sometimes Benadryl is the same ingredient that's on something to help you sleep, but it's also the same ingredient for something for allergies, and so you may already have the medication at home, or you may be taking duplicate things, so always look at the back of it, and you'll see a lot of the labeling. There's hundreds of over-the-counter medications that you'll see in like a cough and cold section, and it's really only 5 different ingredients for all those 100 products. So it's all marketing, so just always look at the active ingredient. And this is a good example. You have Claritin 24, Claritin D 24, 24 is for hours. And pay special attention to that second letter, that D. Makes a big difference, specifically for a person with high blood pressure. That D on the back means pseudoephedrine. Pseudoephedrine can increase your blood pressure, so you definitely want to be very, very pay special attention to those very small differences and that one letter that comes after the prescription or the over-the-counter. And this is the drug facts section. Always look at the back of it for the active ingredient. First thing you should go to, and then on the right-hand side, always look at the max dose that you should take in a day. You should really never exceed that. How to pick over-the-counter medications. I mean, the best thing that you can do if you're in the store, I would go right to the pharmacist in the back and tell them what your symptoms are and have them pick out what the best over-the-counter medication, and then have them explain to you why. 90% of the time, they know the the cheapest one to get that has all the ingredients you need, and they'll always ask you, do you have diabetes? Do you have blood pressure? Because if you're diabetic and we know that alcohol may be a byproduct of an ingredient, we won't give it to you, or we won't recommend it to you. So it's little things that you may not think about. So I would always stress, use your healthcare provider when you can. It's very good. Pill boxes are very good. You can get them for $1, $2. I mean, especially if you're a caregiver for a senior, these are invaluable. So if you are on multiple medications, or you have someone in your family on multiple medications, don't hesitate to ask your pharmacist to put the prescriptions in the full box for you. It may take a little longer for you to get your prescription in that day, but sometimes they have pill packs and blister packs, and we do that for patients all the time, especially with patients on multiple medications, especially when the caregiver doesn't feel comfortable maybe loading the pill bottles properly and things like that. So always think about that. And this is things that we do in the pharmacy. Sometimes we put them in blister packs for patients. Like I say, it may take an extra day or so, but for a senior, it's invaluable when you can, especially with some of our mental health patients who are younger, putting them in blister packs for each day is really helpful. Sometimes people forget to take their medications. One of the top medications that people kind of forget is there's medications that you typically take like once a week, or things like, a lot of, you think for like osteoporosis, or a lot of people who have vitamin D deficiency, they may take it once a week. So try to think of some significant event like, hey, let me take my vitamin D every Sunday before church, right? So just try to tie your medication adherence to some event that that occurs every week. If you do something on every Wednesday, or if every morning before you clock into work, you need to take a multivitamin. Just try to tie it to an event to keep from forgetting. It's really important to keep track of all your medications, whether you take them or not. If a doctor recommends something to you, and even if you don't take it, just keep it in a folder. Just keep track of that name, or just know what it is, because it's going to come up again. And if you go to another doctor, at least you have a record of what you took or what you were previously prescribed. That's one of the things I think a lot of patients take for granted, is just keeping the records of things that you've had. If you've got a flu shot, or if you get a COVID vaccine, make sure you get a copy of that card and put it in the file, put it away. Know who gave it to you, know what location, just very little things. It's really helpful when things go wrong to have that paper trail. And this is it's sheets online that you can print out. You just write down every medication that you have, and it's really good to keep in your pocket or purse, especially if something happens to you. You go to the emergency room, you go to the hospital, or if you're a caregiver for someone, make a list of all their medications. You could just put the name of them, but put it in their pocket, put it somewhere close, so that in an emergent event, someone can look and see what they're on, and that could be the difference between life and death in some situations. And lastly, is one of the things to really keep in mind is medication therapy management. A lot of seniors, a lot of people have Medicare Part D. It's really important before you just pick your Medicare Part D plan each year. What I recommend is take the medications, write them down that you're on or you took that previous year. Just take that list to your pharmacist. Any retail pharmacist, they'll know exactly what to do. What they do is they'll take those medications, put it in the MedicarePartD.gov site, and they run a report, and they'll tell you what the best plan for you to pick for the following year or upcoming year, so that you have the lowest out-of-pocket costs. So that's key. I mean, that could save your household hundreds of dollars in a year just by taking the bottles of medication down to the pharmacist and say, hey, let me know what's the best plan or what's the cheapest plan for me that year. So just keep that in mind. And always know your healthcare provider's names. It's really important to find out Even if you go to a minute clinic or immediate care, you go to a pharmacy, get people's names, know who's taking your blood, and things like that. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Adonis. For the viewers on Facebook, we're asking if you guys still have questions that you can put them in the chat. We are going to take a brief 5-minute break, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to welcome our last panelist. Again, if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat so we can address them at the end. Our last panelist is Donna George. Donna George is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist with Novo Nordisk. Donna has over 25 years of clinical experience in public health, academic, and private sector. For the past 15 years, she has worked in the pharmaceutical and medical device industry with an emphasis on diabetes education. With a personal connection to diabetes, Donna has made it her mission to educate people about obtaining a healthy lifestyle through diet, mindfulness, and exercise. Donna holds a Master's of Science degree in nutrition from Hampton University and a Bachelor's of Science in nutrition from Mutaline College. Please welcome Donna George.
Thank you. Oh, good morning. I was just going to go over some general nutrition. I really like to make it informal and take questions, but I'm going to just differentiate the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian, a registered dietitian. My slides are wordy, so you can copy them, and it gives more information. But I won't, I'm just paraphrasing. And distinguishing between nutritionist and dietitian, a lot of people think that they're interchangeable, but a dietitian has more of a scientific background. They are required to be registered through the Commission of Diabetes Dietetic Registration, and they also have to be legally registered as well. So next slide, as I have a few slides here. And I think the reason why I really kind of focused on this is because there are a lot of times where you get referred to a dietitian, and how often are you going? And most people, what do you think when you get that referral? Like, what's the hesitation? What's the hesitation? There you go. Thanks. What's your hesitation? Anybody? For not going. You think someone's going to take something away from you, right? Okay. So and the reason why I really want to focus on the importance of the difference of what a dietitian can truly do is there are not a whole lot of us that have the degree, who don't have the certification, who aren't registered dietitians, who look like us. And that makes a huge difference. When you see health providers that look like you, it makes a huge difference. So if it's going to be just a conduit to get people more interested into it, I hope that this will do that. The difference between the dietitian is that she's going to promote nutrition and wellness in someone who's sick. And nutritionists typically deal with people who are well. So, and they're going to help you in promoting a healthy eating and balanced lifestyle, but that is one of the major differences. Next slide. So the term dietitian is not, synonymous with nutritionist. And dietitian is regulated, nutritionist is not. In many parts of the world, you have dietitians who are heavily regulated. We have to, someone can actually report us if they feel like they didn't get good service, just like you would a lawyer or a PharmD, anyone who is licensed. And on the other hand, nutritionists aren't regulated. And we have had this debate over years that you have people who call themselves nutritionists who've been able to peddle like different types of therapies for health-related conditions that really have not helped and probably have progressed people's diseases, and then it's really sad. So there's been some real snake oil salesmen out here who've been able to call themselves nutritionists and have caused a lot of harm and more than good. Next slide. So, but in similar they study a lot of the same subjects. If you have someone who's a nutritionist but hasn't been able to go the path of being a registered dietitian, but again, there may be some limitations. There are 3 types of placement. You have some that are in the community and clinical, as well as those who are in food service industries. So those would be the 3 major distinctions. Over years, you've had nutrition that will dive deeper into different modules, all the different things that are coming up, like in functional nutrition, we have studies, where we dive deep in that. There's also for people who are dealing with patients who are on tube feedings, that's a special dietitian specialty there. We have specialties in diabetes, like the certified diabetes education and care and education specialists. Okay, next slide. And then dietitians and nutritionists usually work in different places, as I mentioned. Usually dietitians will work in a hospital setting. They treat usually disease states, where nutritionists usually are often in commercial settings where they work in fitness centers, and also you will find them in government agencies, and they educate like general public on things like well-balanced lifestyle and those kind of things. Okay, next slide. All righty. So the guy who got that out of the way, now I just wanted to talk more about mindfulness and intuitive eating. I think a lot of us have a ton of challenges when it comes to diet, and we're concerned about weight. And then I think mainly it's really because we've gotten to this lifestyle where we are constantly moving and going, and we've put like our nutrition is taking a back seat. And so it's really the reason why we've gotten off track. It's something that you have to think about, but we really don't until we come up across a McDonald's or a fast food place and we grab something quick. And it's really something that if you're eating, and you were supposed to be eating those 3, 4, maybe 5, even more frequently during the day, which is what's recommended, that you really have to give some prep time to. You got to give some conscious thought and selection to that. And we haven't been doing that. The practice of mindfulness, and we've been hearing this term a lot. We hear it's like the Zen Buddhist term, and people are telling you about mindful thoughts and breathing, and eating goes with that. So mindful eating is maintaining that in-the-moment awareness, it says, of the food and drink you put into your body. And it involves observing how you feel and what those signals are. Because this, too, is a lot of where we've gotten off track. And I'd say, when I deal with folks who want to come in and talk to me about weight loss, the first thing I ask is, when did you start having challenges with your relationship with food? Was it somebody who said that you were fat or, thunder thighs, or made some comment on how much you ate? I mean, all of these things could be true. Was it some traumatizing event? Because for us, food is comfort. It can be your friend, and it can be your foe. I mean, you really, but it's something we have to maintain. We have to have. So we got to get a better relationship with food, and mindfulness will help us to do that. One of the main things that gets us off track is that we don't have an ability to have these the cues of when I'm truly hungry and when I'm full, when I need to stop, right? And the reason why we do is we're blowing through food quickly. We're going fast. We're eating quickly. We're just trying to get it in. So next slide. Thanks. We're eating too fast. This is mainly it. So when we eat too fast, you've moved past the point of hunger. You've just shoved it in. And by that time, you've already consumed way more. So this is one of the times that I'd say slow down. If you are eating with a group of people and you look up and you're finished, 15, 20 minutes before everybody else. No, and it's kind of uncomfortable because I'm a slow eater, and I've gone out with friends, and I'm telling you, and they could be fast talkers and fast eaters. It's going, and I look up, and I'm feeling bad because I'm still, 15 minutes in, right? And so that too could be just a major, huge difference because you're taking the time, you're enjoying it, you're in the process of, chewing your food. That's rather than just hauling it in. And I can tell you, I do both. Because there have been days when you've gone past that point of hunger where you're like, oh my God, I'm starving. I can just inhale it. And I did it to a salad yesterday because I looked up and it was 2 o'clock and I got all this stuff in and I didn't get lunch. And so it's super important to make sure that we're taking the time, even if just as you're checking and scheduling your medications or the times that you can take that time with your family and sitting down and eating. I want to say I'm hoping that one of the most advantageous things for me during COVID was that my family was under one roof. And we were able to sit down and take meals together. And even to have my 17-year-old to say, listen, if we're all going to take, because at a point I was like, can we all contribute to somebody making meals here? I can't be the only one to have to come up with the foods. And so she said, well, if I'm going to cook, can we not be sitting in front of the TV and eat? Can we sit down and eat together without the TV? So that, too, can really be a really helpful way to get us to slow down and appreciate the food. Next slide. The other thing, are you responding? Know your body's personal hunger signals. Are you responding to when you're really hungry or you're ignoring it? I say there's certain professions where I know you're going to have some challenges. My nurses, people who I say have on-demand careers. So those folks who are catering and don't have a set schedule, a lunch schedule. And as I said, it's really advantageous to eat more frequently through the day, even having snacks on, healthy snacks, nuts, things like that are quick and accessible, pieces of fruit. You can put them in a bag and snack. But you don't have the time to sit down and take that time. You really want to make that time. All right, so when we think about mindful practices, think about those cues. So for somebody who's feeling unhappy and is going to grab that container of ice cream, because we know it's going to make us feel better, right? Let's think, but we've all done that. We've been there. So I'm saying thinking of different alternatives. It can be a healthier snack. It could be a different activity altogether about going out and taking a walk if that's an option for you. I know sometimes we have some challenges with, not being able to walk through our neighborhoods, trying to find someone who will go with you to the mall. I know they've pretty much have gotten rid of most of those, but if you could find something and you partner or get up in the morning and go and walk with someone when it's a little safer, I think those are options that can be really helpful in place of trying to fill that void of loneliness or that fueling that hunger, that cue, instead of using food. Next slide. Eating alone. So this is really a challenge. So you want to cultivate a mindful kitchen. I think about those seniors, those family members of ours who have to be at home by themselves. And eating is such a social thing. And a lot of us, we get together and any type of celebration that we've had, we usually remember two things about it, who was there and what we ate. And so around that food is almost like another family member for us there. I mean, it's huge. It's plays a huge part in its role in uniting us. And it can bring you to tears. So, honestly, I'd say making sure that you honor that time, that you sit down, that you have a plate. And I'm going to say use a 9-inch plate instead of an 11-inch plate or 13-inch plate. But it's a 9-inch plate, which is the actual size, but you should be eating from a plate. And how many times have we taken meals standing up and walking around? That's not mindfulness. These are the kind of things that encourage us to get off and track and to lessen the real genuine attachment or, good fostering of that good relationship between us and food. It's like something you just fit in versus something that you really, really appreciate that the food has provided nourishment for your body. So having that mindful kitchen, and this is the other thing I will say is you gotta be mindful of what you're bringing into your kitchen. Particularly if you've got family members who've got diabetes or hypertension and you're going to keep bringing this bag of Lay's potato chips and it's sitting in there. They're not buying it, but you're bringing it in the house. And you can't just eat one. You can't. And so a lot of times if it's going to be a food that you're not going to be able to regulate, that's why I love the little bags. We used to have the little 25-cent bags because it was 1 ounce, and that's the serving size. And even the 1 ounce bag now has gotten to like a 2 ounce bag, so it's 2 servings in that big bag. So if it means more to pay a little bit more to be able to portion out your sizes, that would be recommended. I would highly recommend that, but I would also say please don't sabotage your folks. If you know they're trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle and healthy diet, please don't bring in the culprits that are going to be more difficult for them to say no to. All right. Next slide. Connect more deeply with your food. And I say this is just think about it. The journey that food had to get to you. Right? You got to, when we pray and bless that food, we bless the hands that prepared it. Bless the hands that planted it, and those who picked it, and those who drove it to the store. And for those who ended up putting it in the store and having it there for you to go, and the opportunity for you to be able to pick it, provide nourishment for your bodies. And then for the person who brought it home, conceptualized that meal, prepared it, and that we all sit down and honor that person, and we honor the food, and we honor ourselves by taking the time to slowly chew it, enjoy it, every flavor, every bit of it. And think about when you go to a restaurant. When you go to a restaurant, they do such a great job of making sure that it's got color and different texture. This is my husband the other day, who is a fan of this all-white meal. Chicken, he'll do chicken, potatoes, and cauliflower. And I'm like, everything's white. But he's like, but I cooked it and I got it. And it's like, I appreciate that. But when you go to a restaurant, you see how you treat yourself to that. It should be no less than that in your own home. Bring color. Because when we bring color, we bring variety. We bring extra vitamins and minerals. When we have variety, it's not bland. It encourages us to want to keep eating at home and not eating out. And so those are the kind of things you want to be mindful of as well. So, and then, again, just being thankful as you slowly take those bites. And they even recommend putting down your utensils in between bites and chewing. And then taking a few sips of water. And I appreciate the mention of drinking water as your main beverage. Because when I talk to people about weight loss, that's the other thing, is that we have to consider how many calories we consume coming in from all these different beverages. So water, really, really great option. Next slide. Attend to your plate. No distracting eating, because if you're distracted, what happens? Yeah. I'm watching TV, I got that bag of potato chips or that bag of popcorn, and you look down and you're like, oh, what happened? I ate the whole thing. So, and it was like, and it just took minutes. So multitasking is also the death knell for us. We don't do it well. People think we do, but it's like really, if I'm sitting and eating, the only thing that I'm recommending when I'm watching TV doing instead of eating, I say get up and exercise. Because if you're sitting there, you're just sitting there. But if you're exercising, if you could be on a treadmill and watch TV at the same time, oh, great, awesome. We got to get moving. We got to get moving. So that's the only way I say I promote multitasking when it comes to eating. I'm like, give it the time that it deserves. Sit, eat, use it at a time for family and connection. Next slide. You need to understand your motivations. This is, you know, comfort food versus eating healthy foods. And as I brought up about seeing the dietitian, you think we're going to take foods away from you that you like. And when you're looking at people who, you know, and as the, you know, our PharmD mentioned, we got to hold our health providers accountable. So if you are going in to see a dietitian and she's giving you a sheet that says, you know, chicken, broccoli, brown rice, if that's not something that you're eating all the time, be honest. It's like, where the greens at, right? I don't eat this. This is what I do eat. Show me some ways to be able to do that with some healthy modifications. And that's why I'm saying it really helps to know and have someone who looks like you, because we know and we have that experience, that cultural experience. We share that with the different foods. So I can't say enough that if you could ask for a person of color or somebody who's at least familiar with our culture, then that's what you need to demand when you go in. And I think you'd have a better experience. And not only that, you've got a team here. You got a nurse practitioner, you got a PharmD, you got a dietitian. Why just have one provider, your physician, who, you know, as Adonis mentioned, he may have 1 year of pharmacy, one class on pharmacology. They've got one class on nutrition, but they're giving you dietary information. They're telling you, don't ever drink orange juice again. And that's why you think you have limitations. Dietitian's not going to tell you that. Don't drink juice. They're not going to tell you that. We're not a good one. If you wanted to have juice, we can make some alternate changes. But I'm really going to say, it's going to be a limited amount. So just knowing that you can have some things that we're trying to work with you to make sure as your healthcare team, if you got a group of 5 who could do, you know, get you to go, why would you just stick with one who could only get you one place? Right? I mean, you got a team available to you. Please take those resources and use them, because we're here and we've been, as you can see, all these initials behind our names, we've been working hard to try to work with you. So, next slide. I think that's it. All right.
Thank you, Donna George. Now we're going to go with questions. The first question that I have is for, I don't know, I guess, are there certain supplements that should never be mixed with medications?
That's kind of a loaded question, but a good rule of thumb is that really good rule of thumb is any vitamins and supplements you take, you should probably take 2 hours before or 2 hours after any medication. Vitamins and supplements are kind of like what they sometimes do is they bind to the prescription medications, and by them binding together, they end up deactivating the prescription medication you're taking. And some foods can even make medications work less or more. So it's really important that you ask, because every situation is different. But the one that I know that if there was one I had to say is something called St. John's wort. That's one that I would probably stay away from no matter what medication or supplement you're taking. that cause a lot of drug interactions and food interactions. But just really ask your healthcare providers and separate things as much as you can is probably the best rule of thumb I would give.
Oh, and I would just add to that that supplements are regulated here in the United States. So basically, you don't really know the strength of each of those individual supplements, right? So if you get St. John's wort, you might be getting the root in one brand versus, you know, more of the stem in the other. So there really is no governing body that regulates that. The FDA does not on the supplements. So that can make them particularly dangerous.
Okay, our next question is for you, Crystal, and it says, why does water have some effects? Why does water have the same effects as that of a diabetic? Frequent urination.
Well, when you're a diabetic and it's uncontrolled, then that sugar content that's just floating around in your body is what's building up, and that's what's causing you to have to urinate a lot more frequently. When you're drinking water, that's just a great benefit, like overall for your body, and it's cleansing out your kidneys, and you are essentially just eliminating that waste product. So your body has to rid itself of the waste products that it builds up. In our urine system, our kidneys is that way to do that. So when you're drinking all of the water that you're drinking, so like I gave the example, if you're 200 pounds, you should be drinking 100 ounces of water per day. So yes, you will be going to the bathroom more because you are drinking that more water, but the upside of that is that you are in fact ridding your body of the unnecessary waste products versus someone with diabetes who's uncontrolled. The sugar content is just kind of hanging around, and that's what's causing you to urinate more often.
Thank you. For Ms. George, I have, is it true to eat/chew slower will get you full?
Well, I think it depends on what you're eating, right? So things that have more fiber in them, yes. And I think just eating more slowly gives you an opportunity, as I mentioned before, to just really decide whether you're truly hungry, still hungry. It gives you more of a time to check in and feel that feeling of fullness in a more natural way was one of stuffing yourself and then getting past that point where you didn't take the time to do that check-in of feeling, and for that feeling of fullness, you've eaten past that point. Yeah, that's when we feel stuffed and uncomfortable afterwards, when we kind of eaten too fast and too much.
Thank you. For Adonis, I have drug interactions. What pain pills should never be mixed?
So with drug interactions, it's that's probably one of the most deadly things that you probably could encounter with medications, and drug and food interactions, and that occurs with any two things you're taking interact to some degree. So it's always important to know what. When you're taking things like pain medications, the best thing to do, especially with like the opioid crisis and the after effects of that, the best thing to do with when you're on pain medications is to take one pain medication. And if you're taking that pain medication, again, separate it from your other medications that you're taking. Most pain medications most likely are going to make you drowsy. They're going to make you constipated. You may have other, adverse effect or side effects, to those things. But it's really important that even when you start taking pain medications, have someone around observing you for a period of time before you take them, and really understand why you're taking the pain medication. And I feel like if you have to take a pain medication more than more than a week or two, really understand what you're taking it for. If you're diabetic, are you taking it for nerve pain? If you're taking it for nerve pain, then do do you need to take hydrocodone, or is there something else like gabapentin that you should be taking? So really understand why you're taking that pain medication. If you got in a car accident, you got backaches, makes sense, right? You may take some, hydrocodone, but then you want to understand, do you have inflammation in your body? Should you be taking ibuprofen? Should you just be resting it with ice? So really understand. I always look at, why you're taking the pain medication and focus on like the non-pharmacologic things that you can do first. I always say, medications don't really have an effect without you doing some lifestyle modification on your own. So, if they say put ice or wrap it or do something like that, always veer towards that first. But
Thank you. Between Crystal and Adonis, it says flu shots are every year. What about the vaccine? I'm assuming so that they're probably relating, like, because we do the flu shot annually. Do you guys know, or can you answer? Do you think foresee us having to take the vaccine annually?
Right now, the current recommendations are for the COVID vaccine is that there will be a need for a booster shot every year. So that is the current recommendations. So even though if you've had your Pfizer and your Moderna vaccines, the current recommendation is hopefully come the end of this year or early next year, there should be a booster that you should get just to follow up with that. So, but yes, flu vaccine is still currently every year.
Again, some of the questions you guys can decide, or you may want to all pitch in. Are you taking taking supplements a bad thing?
I don't think taking supplements is a bad thing at all. I think, for an individual, you always have to know why you're taking the supplement. What are you taking it for? I mean, I think at minimum, everyone needs to be taking a multivitamin, right? Like a 1-a-day men's, 1-a-day women's, and always start there. You should always at least start with getting your baseline vitamins, nutrients, and supplements, things that you run with the diet that you have. You may not be, meeting all your nutritional, goals for the day. So always start there, and then when you start adding on different supplements and things of that nature, just understanding why is it, everyone has their own personal, goals and responsibilities. So I think that it's a case by case situation. But like if you're, you think if you're an athlete, right, then you may be burning through, different vitamins and supplements much more fastly. So you may need some offset it with supplements, or, maybe you're not getting a good diet in because you may have some health condition where you just are not obtaining, you could have cancer and things like that. So you may need different supplements there because chemo could be causing, your body to waste away. So it's a case by case situation. And I think that's where having like a dietitian, counseling with that, because that's a very customized thing. So.
I would just add to that. Usually when we are going to the doctor, we're seeing some supplements that we have to use now, particularly vitamin D. I even had a therapeutically low vitamin D level. Comes through sunlight. We don't get enough sunlight. You can't supplement that a lot with the diet. I mean, I'd say for us who have plenty and have a well-balanced diet, usually you will have fewer deficiencies. But there are certain foods where you can get, more vitamin C from versus having to take vitamin C, which I would recommend, like, the oranges or broccoli would give you vitamin C, and that would make a difference. And I think Adonis mentioned before about taking orange juice with an iron supplement, because vitamin C helps you absorb your iron better. But typically, if you having something with meat or farina or cream of wheat has actually got more iron in it than any other food. You can have that with a little orange juice or orange on the side, or you could have things that have meat in them, like and tomatoes, which have vitamin C. So something like a combination food, like spaghetti and meatballs, or chili, would suffice in having a well balance of iron and vitamin C complementing. So of course the diet should be able to do it. Mm-hmm.
Also, if you are, it's not a great idea to, you know, kind of read up on the supplement and instead of taking it to your primary care provider, some people are deciding that they're going to use this supplement for, say, this symptom that they might be experiencing, which could actually have an adverse effect. Versus going ahead to your provider and getting checked out to see exactly what's going on and then go from there. So some people are taking recommendations from, say, their next door neighbor or their cousin or their friend and saying, okay, just take this for this issue and it's going to help. So cinnamon, a lot of people, want to fall back on that for in place of diabetes and say, I take cinnamon instead of, say, metformin or glyburide, something like that. So instead of recognizing the symptoms, going to see your provider, getting diagnosed, and getting, on a treatment plan, which maybe not necessarily would be the medication route, but some people just kind of default to supplements overall instead of getting evaluated.
Our next one is plant-based diets are a huge thing now. Is this a good food source?
Yeah, I'd say with plant-based diets, that's sort of embracing the whole vegetarian diet as well, with the help of a dietitian to be able to make sure that you're getting adequate protein would be recommended. Because a lot of times if you're just eating one, proteins come in a complete form. They're amino acids. And not all amino acids are available in plant-based forms. They have to be added and combined with another to make sure that you obtain all of the amino acids to make it a complete food. Where meat gives you, all of the amino acids. So once you take that out of the diet, you need to be able to make sure that you're getting adequate protein in your diet. So I'd say with a little help. But natural foods, if you're saying plant foods, fresher foods, absolutely would be a huge advantage, as you well know.
Thank you. High blood pressure, how do I reduce it without meds?
Without medication, you can reduce high blood pressure. You have to watch your salt content pretty much. Salt is hidden in a lot of foods that people are not aware of. Salt is hidden, say, in all of your processed foods. There's a load of salt in that. Your freezer foods, there's salt in that. Your lunch meats, your pickles, things like that. So a lot of times, when I talk to some people, even going into their house and, just, oh, no, I don't eat salt. But everything that I see has salt in it. And while they're talking, they're eating essentially salt. And then they're kind of upset, well, no, you took my blood pressure wrong. Well, no, let's kind of work our way backwards and let's talk about what it is exactly that you are eating. So making sure that you read the back of the food label and see exactly what is in the product that you are eating. So if you prefer to, hopefully the preferred route would be like your whole foods. So, taking your own food, cutting it up, cooking it yourself. But if you're unable to do that, looking for those options that are lower in salt or have no salt. Even. You can also exercise. Exercising works hand in hand for a lot of things. Like I stated earlier, getting that 5 days a week, 30 minutes minimum a day of exercising, and that will help lower your blood pressure along with drinking the water. So, a lot of people want to get away from drinking water, but water will help lower your blood pressure as well. So there are a lot of options that are available so that you can lower your blood pressure. And yeah, it's doable. It's doable, but you have to work hard at it. It's not today I'm not going to eat all the salty foods or for a whole week and then next week I'm going to start back up again. No, you have to be diligent. You have to be persistent with everything that you're doing to see some effect. And once you see the effect from it, continue to do that.
Another thing that you know, I think about is, what's the cause of it? Like a lot of it is mental health. So I think stress is a huge factor. So church obviously is a big place where you can go and try to relieve stress. So I think that's a critical thing. Also, if you have any injuries, say you have this bad knee pain and you're taking ibuprofen all the time. I mean, the ibuprofen is what's causing your high blood pressure. So always try to look at, do you have a toothache or some other factors that are involved? Could it be weight gain? So when you're going to your healthcare provider and they're putting you on blood pressure medications, I mean, the first thing I would ask is, what do you ask the doctor, what are some lifestyle modifications you think that I can make? And sometimes it could be because you may have high thyroid issue or low thyroid, or there can be some other healthcare factor that's causing the high blood pressure. So if you're not treating your diabetes, but you want to bring your blood pressure down, you need to treat your diabetes first, and things will fall, and vice versa. So I think really finding out what's the cause of your high blood pressure and what are some quick things, what are some modifications you can make to your lifestyle. So I think stress is always the biggest one that people don't think about, and that's an easy, well, depends on the situation, right? But it can be fixed.
And I would just say the recommendation, salt and sodium are, what you're looking at is sodium content in the food labels. And the recommendation for someone who's trying to follow a low sodium diet used to be 2,000 milligrams per day. And the recommendation now is 1,500 milligrams per day. So it's gone down lower. As was mentioned, the natural foods, but canned foods, and you could look at a can of tomato paste versus a can of tomato sauce, and there's a difference between 220 milligrams of sodium from in the tomato sauce versus tomato paste. If you get a tomato paste that has garlic flavor, then they've added the extra 220 milligrams of sodium. So you want to go with plain. So it's really important to read the labels and to check and see. And even cereal has any of the shelf foods that have longer shelf life. Sodium is a preservative, and so that's the reason why you see high sodium content. It's 180 milligrams of sodium in your cornflakes. So not high, but in proportion to, I'm just wanting you to be aware of that. If that's part of your 1,500 milligrams for the day, you have to count your cereal as well.
Dr. Georgia, are you answering?
One more thing I would recommend, if you have high blood pressure, the one thing you should probably do is get a really cheap blood pressure machine, whether it's for the wrist or the cuff. When you go to the doctor's appointment, that shouldn't be the only time you know what your blood pressure is. You should definitely have a cheap blood pressure cuff, $10, $11. And take your blood pressure, once a week, once a day, whenever you may get a headache but if you're not monitoring it in between your doctor's appointments, then you can't tell if anything that you're doing is helping or hurting, because you could be improving your blood pressure and you don't even know it. But when you go to the doctor's office, it's high. So they say, stay on the medication. But so that's just like diabetics do with their blood glucose levels. You should probably do the same thing with your blood pressure, and try to do it at the same time each time you take it, so the conditions are somewhat similar. Well, 120 over 80, but if you have like diabetes, it could be like 130 over 80, and then different guidelines based on how many medications you're on, because you may have different goals. It could be 140, so it depends on what your other health conditions are. But
It also depends on your age. The older you are, we don't want the blood pressure to be too low because, you know, sometimes the older people, of course, like Adonis mentioned, has the risk of falling. And so you don't want their blood pressure to be too low. So it depends on your age also, what numbers would be considered normal for you.
Okay, for Donna George, I have, are you currently accepting new patients?
Um, so the short answer to that is I'm not affiliated with any hospital. I work with a pharmaceutical, with an insulin company, but I do on the side see patients. So I mean, if you have any questions, I'm not like taking insurance or anything or billing people, but I do believe in making sure that we have the information. So if you have any questions, I'll make sure that LaDonna has my information so you can reach out to me.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, can you maintain a healthy body or lifestyle by just eating correctly?
No. I'm proof of that. So, I mean, I realized, you know, when I at one time addressed just the diet, if you're not moving, it's a combination. And then for people who have diabetes, it's a combination of the three. Exercise, diet, and medication. So you got to get moving because it's calories in, calories out, burning off, and you know, this ketogenic diet, which most people are using. Perfect example of that is it gets you to burn. It's supposed to get you to use fat as a fuel source, which is basically putting your body in starvation mode. We want to burn fat, and the only thing that burns fat is movement. We got to move it. So getting into exercise every day and then balancing a healthy diet, I think that's when you're going to see the changes, but you can't do one without the other.
And for Adonis, I have, of the pain meds, which is better for intake, ibuprofen or acetaminophen, which is Tylenol?
I mean, it depends. So, for instance, if you have high blood pressure, I would probably say Tylenol because ibuprofen over time can increase your blood pressure. So it's kind of going against what your goal is. If it's for like a fever reducer, probably acetaminophen. In children, I typically say Tylenol or acetaminophen. But I think either one of them are okay as long as they're not, if you're not taking it for like more than 2 weeks at a time, because then that's when it becomes, you're changing it from an acute thing to more of a chronic medication that you're taking, and it can have effect on your kidneys, which could then lead to increased blood pressure if you don't have high blood pressure already. So I would just say do things in moderation and probably Tylenol over ibuprofen, if you don't have high blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure.
Okay, for Crystal, how can I choose a trusted health care provider?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, if you are a senior and you have Medicare, a good way to like build rapport with a healthcare provider is to go in for that wellness exam. So all they can talk about is wellness at this particular exam. If you go for that, they cannot bring up any other kind of issues. They can only talk about wellness. So if you want to start there, make that wellness exam. That's all that you can talk about. That's all they can talk about. And that way you can ask questions. You can see where they're coming from. If you feel like your provider is someone who is only pushing, say, medications, and instead you want an alternative to that, you can bring that up as well in that wellness exam and ask them, okay, instead of, say, taking this, are there other things that I can do, lifestyle changes that I can do that I can incorporate into what I'm already doing to kind of change what's going on. If you are not a senior and you want to choose someone, go in probably for your physical exam. That's a yearly exam that the insurance covers. And that way you can sit and talk with the doctor or your provider at that point as well and kind of see where it is that they're coming from. And if you go ahead and select them and then middle of the road, you feel like no, this isn't working out, if your insurance in fact allows you to make that change midway through, then, you know, I would say speak with somebody that you know and see what provider they go to. Are they comfortable with them? What kinds of things that they address and talk with them about, and just kind of, you know, ask in your circle, say your family, your friends, or whatever, and see who's going to be covered in your network, and then work your way from there.
This is a three-part question. What are the ingredients in the COVID-19 vaccination? How are the drugs made? And how can I ensure its safety?
So with the COVID vaccine, there's a lot of questions that people have, and I've given quite a few presentations for the different companies, just trying to break some of the stigmas. I mean, the big thing is, you know, they made this vaccine so fast. You know, all the other vaccines take a long period of time. You know, that's a valid concern. A lot of people think, you know, how come the African American community doesn't want to take vaccines? I'm like, well, because Tuskegee experiment really did happen, but you know, that was years ago, and thousands of clinical trials have occurred since that point in time. A lot of drugs have come to the market, a lot of protections are in place, but that stigma still exists in our community, and sometimes it's not dispelled when you look at things where we don't always get the same healthcare treatment, or we don't feel like we do because it's based on facts, right? So one of the things with the COVID vaccine, I'll try to simplify kind of how they were able to make it so fast, right? So one of the first things they did is they took medications like polyethylene glycol, right? So that's in some laxatives, that's over the counter. They've taken proteins and things that have been on the market for over 20 years. So that's been like the base of ingredients that the vaccine is made of. So they've used ingredients that have been around and that have been studied. So they're not using something that's new. The second thing that they did is like, okay, how can you ramp them up so fast? So what happened is most vaccines come in a vial, and the vial is like sterile water and something else. So during the production phase, that part of the vaccine started process. When COVID started, they started ramping up those vials of water, and I'm just simplifying, it's other ingredients in it, but they started ramping up millions of vials of those bottles, so that the only thing that had to happen is that the final ingredient just has to be put in to this vial, and then we can mass produce it. So the key is, how did they come up with that final ingredient? So it's like a puzzle piece, right? So they were trying to find what puzzle piece would deactivate COVID. So what they did is they used these supercomputers, which can do billions of lines of tests, right? So they have these technology companies all over the world that have just basically, since COVID started, they started running and trying to find what that missing puzzle piece was. Once that missing puzzle piece was found, then they basically created a protein and dipped it into those vials that were ready to go. So that process, I mean, relatively simple process, but it wasn't like they're using new vaccines, they're using new ingredients. They're using ingredients that are already over the counter. They're just using it in a different way. And then, ironically, a black woman created the technology or the process for the COVID vaccine. But vaccine is really safe, and that's kind of the short way of why it was able to be produced so quickly. And then the Johnson & Johnson one, which is different, is basically copper-based, right? So copper's been around forever, right? So we know copper is safe, right? Copper is a vitamin, right? So that's kind of one of the base ingredients of that vaccine, but it's just that the way that they did that one is different than the Moderna and the Pfizer one.
The next question is eating garlic. Is eating garlic good for your heart and blood pressure?
So I would say you can't go wrong with like some of the natural foods that we have out here, right? Instead of the supplements, it's great for seasoning. As I mentioned before, we were looking at sodium, and most of us still, and I hope, well, we can come away from seasoned salt, but I mean, I had to even break my husband from the seasoned salt. And using herbs and spices. So definitely, I mean, I think, they're anti-inflammatories, they're garlic, turmeric has some great properties in anti-inflammatories, as well as ginger. So just a combination, cumin, a lot of different herbs and spices. So I encourage you to, come away, think about when you're looking at different ways to flavor and season foods, looking up different recipes. This Mediterranean diet has really been at the top of the list as being one of the top diets. The DASH diet, which is also the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, have been the top rated diets over the last couple of years. And DASH specifically for African Americans, recommendation is that we have at least 7 servings of fruits and vegetables in our day. And some would argue even more for African Americans, like 9. So I just say even combining garlic, any of those different herbs and spices, fresh herbs, oregano, basil, all of that to try and season other than using salt, lemon juice, olive oil, all of that, embracing that Mediterranean diet. And then I'd also say those Mediterraneans, I don't know that the diet, it looks like it's, superior. I mean, I think we have, quite a bit more processed foods here. They're dealing more with fish, chicken, more vegetables and fruit, more olive oil, even a little red wine, a lot less seasoning, things more fresh. But I'd also say their lifestyle, they seem to spend 2 to 3 hours, getting together to eat together. So again, for that mindfulness and making that, it makes a difference. So I think that's the reason why you see that Mediterranean diet and them boasting longer lifespans because of it.
Okay, this is going to be our final question, and then we're going to actually get questions from the audience. Which vaccine is the best?
Well, the 2 vaccines that are currently on the market are pretty much the same. It's like they're made the same way. It's just 2 different companies that made them, but the way they work are the same, and the ingredients may vary a little bit, but they're both protein based, and it's just 2 different proteins that they're using. So whichever one that you can get, I would say is the best one right now. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being really serious about that.
Donna George, my daughter's in the audience, and she just texted me, what's wrong with seasoning salt?
The sodium level. It's the sodium content. Yes. You're going to blow your sodium. That 1,500 milligrams, I guess, let me put this in context. 1 teaspoon of salt, regular table salt, has 2,300 milligrams of sodium. So your seasoned salt is up there. Absolutely.
And children are actually, we're finding more high blood pressure in children, diabetes in children. children having just all kinds of effects that typically would not happen until later in life. But because of the diet, the things that we're doing, the inactivity, is leading more so towards and is working against us. It's killing people earlier and much sooner, and they're having more complications from things that they should never be exposed to. And yes, salt is one of those.
Okay, now we're going to
Okay.
take questions from the audience.
I have a question about I was trying different diets and I came across one and I want to ask, is the keto diet healthy?
So, as I mentioned before, what it does is it has you consume a really low intake of carbohydrates in order to get, which your body burns off really efficiently. So the recommendation is that we take in about 50% of our calories from carbohydrates. If you have cereal and milk in the morning for breakfast, how long before you get hungry again after you have that? Relatively quickly, which indicates that there's we have the efficiency to burn those calories off very, very well. So what this does is has you take in far less carbs, and then your body starts going into starvation mode, and then it starts to break down fat. So when we start breaking down something that we need, the body uses fat for warmth, it uses fat for protection, it uses fat for a lot of the metabolic, things that are going on in the body and that we need it for. And so you're going to break it down in order to use it as a fuel source. And your body doesn't like that. It's not the preferred source. The preferred source is definitely glucose, which is a byproduct of it's carbohydrate. So in the short term, you are going to see some weight loss, but this is a starvation diet. And what we want to do is burn fat. We do not want to break down fat. And there's a difference. And so long-term effects of this diet, we don't know. I have people who are out here, who are proponents of it. And so we do see with any fad diets and a lot of these diets some quick and fast weight loss. But it's not sustainable. And then long-term, too, we don't know the effects of what that's going to have on the body. Because you're also consuming large amounts of fat. So when you have these other conditions as well, like diabetes, yes, we should be reducing the amount of carbs, but when you start increasing fat, when diabetes is a condition that already has put you at risk for heart disease, now we're adding all this fat too, we don't really know what the effects that's going to have on the body long term and the overall effects of your health.
And I was going to add also all of the fat, the high fat content that comes with the keto diet that has an effect on the heart, your cholesterol numbers and all of that. So, having that blood draw even before you start the keto diet, and then, during the keto diet, a lot of people see changes in their cholesterol. So we don't want your cholesterol to be too high. So, you have to take all of that into consideration. If you're putting in all of this fat, it's going to have an effect somewhere. So, a lot of people, it's going to affect their cholesterol levels, which leads to, like Donna George was saying, the heart attacks. It puts you in increased risk for that, and clogged blood vessels and things of that sort.
Well, I did a little research and it said that, I was looking at the keto diet, that it helps with your blood pressure and it helps with your cholesterol, the bad and the good. So I don't know. Yeah, that's the follow-up because I have a question about that.
Well, because you're doing this rapid weight loss, and any weight loss, particularly with hypertension, we start to see some weight loss. You'll see some benefits to your blood pressure because the less weight you have on it, the less your heart has to work and pump. So you'll see some benefits to that. But long-term overall effects, we don't know what. I mean, with this high-fat diet, it will only push those numbers higher. I guarantee that for sure.
My question is about the difference between organic grown vegetables or regular grown vegetables. Is there a difference? Taste wise, I think so. Taste, but that's the extent of what I kind of know. Taste wise, I think it's a difference, and the preservatives that are used to grow the other plants, and is there a difference? Is the first part of the question, and to tag the answer or the conversation you all were having just a little earlier about eating what it's doing to the children, and you're finding different things in the younger age in this day and age. Is that a contribution to how our food is being grown? So that's why I'm asking the organic versus whatever, and then what we're seeing in the children at a younger age now when they used to have those issues happen when they get older.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I will say organic versus inorganic, because there's a huge price difference between those two. I think it's mainly less pesticides, the way that it's also processed. And I always tell my kids that during the time I was growing up, when we brought vegetables and fruits home, they had flavor. What we see is that because of mass production, we've got a lot of grocery store chains like Jewel who will pick those foods prior to them being ripened and come to full ripeness, and then try to artificially ripen them in a refrigeration sort of process, and that's why they don't have any taste or flavor. So, and you realize that when you bring the organic stuff home, it doesn't last as long, but your other vegetables last a lot longer. So if you could choose like a Pete's, but knowing that you only have a couple of days there, and the convenience is that you can, and this is where we've compromised on convenience, where we go to, you want to shop maybe once or twice a month, because I see us when we go to Sam's and to Costco, we don't want to go back to the store. But in most places in other countries, folks usually shop for food like every 1 or 2 days. So that's the difference in the trade-off. And so, if you want to, I'd say going to maybe a pizza. You don't have to do organic, just fresh, and knowing the process of how it got there. But if you notice the difference in the taste, I think that's the real difference in the taste, is the way that it was refrigerated. Yeah, so if you've got smaller chain stores that don't have the ability to ripen food artificially, then those would be the ones that I would frequent. And unfortunately, I'm telling you, I grew up with a Jamaican mom, and we would go Saturday morning, and we go to 5 different stores. We had the fruit stand and Jewel and the meat market and all these different places, and it was an all-day thing. But that's really just kind of what you have to do, is to just sort of go to other places to try and make sure that you get the balance and the good nutrients that you need and quality foods.
I have a follow-up question concerning body cleansing. Is it necessary to do periodic fasting, periodic cleansing of the body? They have a particular thing that I do sometimes. It's called the lemonade diet or master cleanse. Is that necessary, or is there another way to cleanse the body, or is it necessary to clean your body?
Yes, they do have, where you can detox your body, and that is a really good thing to do. So, doing the fasting, during even some people choose to detox by doing something called coffee enemas. I don't recommend that you do that. I don't, talk to your primary care provider before you take it to that version. But yes, there are a lot of health benefits, because you do rid your body of the waste that your body do hold on to. Your liver in particular has to detox. So a lot of waste is filtered out through our liver, and if your liver just isn't functioning like it should, everything is just going to clog there, and you're going to feel the effects of that. So It depends, I would say the type of detox that you do would depend, say, on the conditions that you have. So that's an important conversation to have with your provider. That way you're not offsetting something or causing more harm over here when you're trying to be beneficial in this particular area, if that makes sense. So working in connection or having that relationship with your provider to know exactly what detox is going to be best for you. So yeah, there is a lot of benefits for detoxifications.
I would just say the things that kind of hang in your body and the things that we put in our bodies, again, alcohol is a toxin. Sugar in excess tends to increase inflammation in the body. Just on basis, you're really able with high fiber diet, good quality nutrients, and lots of water, and just being mindful of what you put into your system that isn't toxic can really sort of just help do in its natural order. The body is in natural order, right? So if you're putting something toxic into it, it's going to, it has to be filtered through the kidneys. So, like I said, and then that's flushed through water, as if you're seeing that when someone mentioned about the increase in fluid. And the last question I didn't mention, as it was mentioned, what we're seeing with diabetes and for kids, this is a weight-related issue, lack of activity. I don't think it's about the diet as much, but that too, because a lot of these kids are sitting at home eating a lot of processed foods as well. But we're also seeing a shift in type 1 diabetes. We're seeing a lot more older adults being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and a lot more kids being diagnosed with type 2, and that's directly related to weight and diet.
All right, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists and our moderator as well. You guys can do better than that. Come on. Gave wonderful information, and we thank you all for sharing your gifts with us on today. And I got a better understanding of things. I know some of you did as well. And so I want to just ask everyone if you can just stand, and we'll end in prayer. I'm not sure if they will take questions or if you want to ask them something on the side later. That's up to them. But we really appreciate them sharing their information today. There is a flyer on the screen that talks about our next health summit. And Christ Revival, this was our first health summit. Come on, give it up. Woo! And so this is the second one that we will have. It will be September the 18th this year. And we will be talking about holistic health, mental illness, and counseling. Those are big issues that we as a community need to address. And so, again, we welcome questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions if you have them, because you don't know. If you don't ask, you won't know. Amen? Amen. So we'll go close in prayer. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time of sharing. We thank you for all of the providers, the panelists on today, God. We thank you, Lord, for their gifts and their talents that they were able to share with us today. We hope, God, that people can take this information and take it back to you, oh God, because you said to lean not to our own understanding. We always trust you. And so, God, we say thank you, oh God. Thank you, oh God, for the people that took their time out to come today, the people that were watching online, oh God. We thank you for them as well, and we ask that you will help us, oh God, to get a balance in our life, for spiritual and natural, oh God. We pray, oh God, that we get a balance in our life. In the name of Jesus, we pray. We ask that you take us from this place, but not your presence. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Have a wonderful day.